All right. Well, hello and welcome to this double reading this evening. I'm Ted Morrissey and I'm hosting Grant Tracey and Jeremy J.D. Schraffenberger on their reading tonight. I'm just going to do a very quick kind of general overview and then introduce Jeremy first to do a little reading for us, and then we'll get to Grant in just a bit. And as is typical, we'll have a little Q&A towards the end. So be thinking of some questions. I know sometimes when people do these, if people want to, they can send questions via the chat. So if that would be more comfortable for you, feel free to do that. Otherwise, we can just kind of all chime in as we want to the last 20 minutes or so of our recording time here. But yeah, again, we're here to celebrate a couple of books that have come out pretty much at the same time. And Grant and Jeremy obviously are colleagues and longtime friends, and I've been friends and colleagues with them for a while. So I wanted to host both of them. So I decided just to see if we want to do something together. And specifically, we're here to celebrate Jeremy's release of this new chapbook of poems, American Sad. And I do want to say right up front, 12 Winters is not the publisher. Main Street Rag is the publisher of this chapbook. So I wanted to be sure to give Main Street Rag a shout out there. But we have published Jeremy in the past. I'll just quickly kind of plug a couple of those things. One of the first books that I published when I started 12 Winters Press was Jeremy's book, the collection of poems, The Waxen Poor. And then not long after that, we published The Necessary Poetics of Atheism, poems and essays with Jeremy, but also Martina Spada and Lauren Marie Schmidt. And then also, Jeremy's contributed a couple of prose pieces to our online journal, 12 Winters Journal, which is going to be coming out. And one of those pieces is included in our Best of anthology, which is going to be coming out a little bit later this year. So that's all terrific. I was trying to think when I first got to know these guys. I know Jeremy and I have been friends for, I think, well over a decade. We met at the University of Louisville at the Louisville Conference on Literature and Culture many, many years ago. And of course, probably many of you know Louisville is Jeremy's hometown and one of his main stomping grounds for a long time. And because of my friendship and working with Jeremy, that gave me the opportunity to poach Grant from his previous publisher in 2015. I remember it well because we met during the North American Review Bicentennial Conference. And so since 2015, I've been Grant's publisher as well. So that's definitely worked out. So again, I want to give just a very brief, but a little more formal introduction to each of these guys before they do their thing. So I will go ahead and talk about J.D. Schraffenberger, Jeremy Schraffenberger. And again, this is the new chapbook from Main Street Rag, American Sad. And I'm just going to go ahead and read off of the intro on the back, or the bio on the back, because it's obviously up to date. It says J.D. Schraffenberger is editor of the North American Review and professor of English at the University of Northern Iowa. He is the author of two books of poems, St. Joe's Passion and The Waxen Poor. His other work has appeared widely in magazines and anthologies, including Best of Brevity, Best Creative Nonfiction, Notre Dame Review, Poetry East, Prairie Schooner, and elsewhere. He lives in Iowa with his wife, the novelist Adrienne Finley, and their two daughters. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy to begin his reading.
Thanks so much, Ted. I want to also say thank you for not only hosting me, hosting us. I think it's really great when you're a writer and you spend so much of your time alone in your own head, contemplating and creating what you want to share with others. You don't often get to come together. And what better way to come together than on Zoom when people can come, from great distances. Right now, I'm in Boston. I was talking to Ted before the reading here, doing some research about the history of the North American Review. You mentioned my editorial work. Of course, Grant, we're co-editors. I put a few issues in the back there so you could see the most recent issues. A little plug for Grant's work and my work on the magazine. You know what? I think, Ted, you're right. We met at the 20th Century Literature Conference. In fact, when we met, it was called the 20th Century Literature Conference still, instead of the Conference for Literature and Culture since 1900. That's how long ago it was. The 20th century felt like it was just yesterday. And thanks for mentioning the waxing poor and the necessary poetics of atheism too. I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to read a few poems. Um, this the book is called American Sad, and fair warning, it has sadness. It goes into dark places. In fact, I think if I were to read this, I'm not going to actually do this. I should put it in black and white just to make it a little sadder. Or I don't know if I could adjust the darkness. I can make it more noir, but I actually won't do that. I think that's kind of silly. Um, but it is dark. It goes to some places. I'm going to read the first poem. Actually, it's the second poem, but it's very early in the collection, and it gives the collection its title, and then it kind of announces a few of the things that preoccupied me when I put this together, um, namely the conventions of naming things, of defining things, of knowing things, of measuring things. This is a poem also that contemplates death, at least briefly. So if that's not sad, I've got more. This is called Time. I haven't worn a watch in 10 years. You can't escape it anyway. Nobody tells you when you're young, pay attention to your body. All those years you could have had a different life. It's only habit to measure a day as duration. 1, 2, 3. My daughter's piano lessons teach her relativity. She bobs her head 4 times, counting whole notes. I think about her future life, the troubles, the pain. Who knows how many times she'll contemplate death? What kind of world could she possibly enjoy? Is it enough to carry a few pleasant memories of camping in the woods? You can endure almost anything for a few minutes, but there's a peculiar American sadness that lasts forever. If I had it to do over, I would. New everything, start again, every day the first. It might end happily in love. The body holds in its possession the passage of time. Your heart, your breath, the final atomic fixture. On whose account do we draw? I have to believe she'll find a way. Nothing happens in 3 dimensions. I know. But the 4th one is such a sad story. It must be worth telling. I had a good time putting this reading together. I've read from the book a few times now, and I have a kind of set list. I know the rhythms of it, but I thought I'd do something different here. So I'm skipping to a poem I haven't read out in public just yet. But it's also another poem that thinks about conventions of naming, conventions of how we measure things. Um, it contemplates death and mortality. It's funny. I teach creative writing, and a lot of my students, when we start reading poetry, they ask me, "Is every poem actually about death?" And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe they are. I don't know. At least mine are. I think at some point. I also would say that a lot of these poems within them, I'm not here as a fiction writer or as a writer of stories. Grant's going to read a story for us later, but these are poems in which stories pop open, different worlds pop open, little narratives kind of appear, and so this is one in which that's the case. This is called Calendar. A week here, a week there. What's it matter? Counting days, one of them you'll be dead. Another one you'll enjoy too many drinks and wake in the night on a stranger's couch. The dark will dissolve, pigment to pixel to picture. On Thursday, all at once, he realized the truth. He said, I cannot tell a lie. I said, I cannot tell the time. One time we met on the stairs in a strange house. We traded true stories on a brown leather couch. I admit I've seen better days, and he agrees. The ink crossing out each day is midnight blue. In the white space for memos, I write a story. The memo writer remembered herself. She was a psychic in a past life. She dreamt a strange dream, wandering the desert of longing. Red stars fell from the sky. They lit the earth on fire. The memo reads, "Bring me milk in the morning." Our anniversary, we did puzzles over coffee. We laughed at the length of our little spoons. Every year, my body forgets itself a little. There are no cruel months, only cruelties. I count on them. I live inside them like pupae. One day, my long-suffering death will hatch. Pull stories from a hat, stuff them up my sleeve. Pink light inhales the unpainted house. Squirrels graze the orange sunflowers slumping. In the strange yard, I find a clutch of gray eggs. From every dark window, you watch me pick them up, drop them in my Easter basket. Then we'll call it a day. You know, being here with Ted and Grant and Brady, I feel like a podcast might erupt here at any moment. I'm going to read a poem called Money, if I can find it. I'm trying to find money. Can anybody help me find money, please? Here's a poem called Money. And again, you know, I put these together because I wanted to kind of point out something that maybe I hadn't thought about before, which is that these poems are preoccupied with definitions of things, of the conventions of naming and defining. You know, here's the question: what is money? This is also another poem in which a world comes into being. A fictional little narrative sort of erupts and then goes away. Money. Don't ask how much, but how long. Ask what is my wingspan, what length my fingers. Will I grow a furry tail, my baby teeth sharpen? You may as well invent a new animal if you want to know what money means. When you count your chips, another world pops open. In one of them, you are rich with ugly poetry. In one of them, I am your pretty wife. Tall grass sprouts from the moist places of my body. I am the queen of the prairie, spending golden coins. Quiet green voices murder me in my sleep. They say the currency of dream is light. We spend it on popcorn at a county fair. Tattooed men take our tickets, bearded ladies laugh. The Ferris wheel launches loose of its axle. I'm tumbling downhill toward the valley. All of our cash deposits, forever on hold. You can actually buy the future a name. My hands touching the slick muscles of your back. I was a vegetarian for 20 plus years. I was a vegan for some of that time as well. Um, and I think it was because, I was able to talk about animal rights and giving moral considerability to other non-human creatures, and in some ways creatures that are better than us. But it was really the imagination of the body and the flesh, and realizing that what I was eating was the muscle, the locomotion of another creature, another animal. Animals populate this whole collection. They pop up here and there as symbols. They're there as omens or portents. They're there as fear, as symbols of fear. And this poem, in quite a very specific way, is all about animals and our own animality, our own sense of being creaturely. This is called Meat. The oily factory of my gut whispers its oldest secret. Garbage in, garbage out. My codependent dyspepsia. I don't remember being an oblivious teen, but was. Doing cartwheels for no reason, I ate my weight in gold. Supermarket cashiers fingering my food. Hamburger, chicken wing, fish stick, corn dog, flesh of pork chop, flesh of fleshy others. I dine the pink banquet alone. I think about how every day a child just disappears, probably dead, like these animals, heads twisted off, their limp helix necks, fruit on the muscular vine. How many clicks away from sane before you see meat everywhere, all of it yours to do as you please? I uncoil my entrails from my belly like wet rope, spread them on the grass to read, black omens settling on my head like a flock of birds finding its roost. The children are hardly ever found. You could go mad imagining the rank smell of their fear, their last words. It won't be long before you join them. I'll meet you there. In the hot, clenched dark, the trick is to play dead. And then there you are, just like that. How many times could I have been taken? I count at least 100. A dozen times each summer, wandering the woods, tender little meat stick, riding my bike to town. Before it rains, leaves turn their white bellies up. I climb into the sinewy arms of a raggedy tree. I am tissue, skin, tendon, fat. I am a superstitious sap. What will my liver say? My long ruminant colon, when the storm slips his forked tongue down my throat, which organ will reveal who could do such a thing? That poem went to a place and kind of went to a place imagining that, a child being abducted and killed. That's a terrible, terrible place. And a lot of times I think that when we write, we get to a place and we immediately run from it, because we're scared of what we might imagine. We're scared of what we might discover, either about ourselves or about humans in general. And this is one maybe not so dark, but this is one that is inspired by something that haunted me as a child. I remember getting this, and it's not a big deal, but I remember getting this ditto sheet in maybe the second grade. Maybe it was even earlier than that, first, second grade. And it had a question. It asked me that what do you do? What should you do if you took money from your mother's purse? And I felt seen. I felt like, oh my God, they know I've been taking quarters out of my mom's wallet and taking it to buy candy. Like I felt like something about the world was revealed by that little ditto sheet about morality and about ethics, about who we are and the lies we tell and the lies we carry with us. And I don't know why. I'm decades later, that little sheet, which asks me basically about morality, still sticks with me. So this is this is a poem. It's not as dark as the other one, but this is a poem that's about lies. It's called Lies, and again, it's about definitions. This poem is in some ways trying to create an index of different kinds of lies. And let's see. Yeah, I think there's also another little origin myth, little story that pops up in the middle of it. But I'll go ahead and read it and be done with it. Maybe it'll clear my conscience after 40 damn years. Lies. The ditto sheet asks, am I morally lucky? The warm answer is in my palm, a quarter from my mother's purse. I fill in the blank honest as I can. You cannot always tell the truth. I count how many times I've lied, divide by time, multiply distance. The answer always comes out wrong. The truth takes its sweet, lonely walk along the slender rim of the horizon. Tell me the biggest lie you ever told. Here's one. Long ago, all the people died. They never knew the beauty of their lives. Theft is the lie of belonging and belief. My blue bike stolen, garage left open, someone playing out scenes of my life. You have to open yourself up to it, not letting the children see pieces of a baby bunny bloody in the yard. That is the lie of stillness I tuck into bed. Numbers are the sharp lie of plenty. Words are the shapely lie of lust. Pictures are 1,000 lucky charms. Pluck a cherry from the tree of regret. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. Lie like a dog or rug, multiple choice. Dogs tell the intransitive lie of grace. Yesterday the sky was so clear, I wept. I sang the harmonic lie of thanksgiving. And then the world rained itself clean. All along, God said, put the quarter back. You've been wrong, not wronged. Let's buy taffy at the 7-Eleven. I remember how to fill in the blank with the biggest lie of all. Don't worry. Got a couple more poems here, I think. This one is called Lingo. And once more, it's asking about conventions of naming and defining. It also, I think, if you've taught poetry at all, or maybe if you've read poetry and maybe we're baffled by it, it can seem like a riddle. It can seem like I need the an equation to figure out what this means. And it's hard to get over that sense that you decode a poem rather than allowing yourself to be in it. But I thought I would lean into this idea of everything being symbolic or everything meaning something else. So this is sort of playing with that idea. Lingo. The word for love is mirror. The word for life is grass. In the walls, plastic pipes and copper pipes and wires. In the basement, radon breathes into the wheezy furnace. The word for home is ocean. The word for water is wind. The woman next door with cancer sitting in the sun needs help walking. Birds on the porch rail watch. On another planet across the galaxy is a woman just like her. She wears her floppy sun hat, remembers her children as children. I visit her every other day. I bring cookies and lemonade. The word for death is fellow. The word for mother is breath. The house with rusty hinges needs new white paint. You could scrape it clean. Start again. Slip a pipe cleaner into your veins to scrub yourself well. Replace your parts. As children, we imagined our future selves remembering. There's a word for that. The black halo of time eating its tail. The word for tongue is sun. The word for touch is fall. She whispers to her cancer, I've always loved you, I always will. Her cancer says he'll be her narrow fellow in the grass. He tells her the word for music. He sings the word for light. I'll read one last poem here, which is inspired by a summer job I had in college. I was a plumber's apprentice. Plumber's apprentice means that you just get to do all the, well, sometimes literally shitty work. I never became a full-fledged plumber. This is called Plumbing. And again, a little story breaks out in this one as well. Plumbing. I shovel pipe ditches and gravel all day. It's work you can't see when it's done. In the morning, cement men will come to cover it for good, but for now, I dig. When the boss isn't looking, I write a story in magic marker on the PVC. Whatever family lives here will bathe in the secret water of these words. I cut the pipes to size, glue the fittings. You could make any shape you want. A spray of subterranean pipe-fit stars. The story begins one day, long ago. The world wanted everything down. Trees, birds, planes, houses, the rain. All at once they fell to the ground. The angry sea rose to meet the sun. People hid beneath their folded arms until a bright carpet of seedling scruff promised a spring. Tomorrow, the end. You frame the house on a concrete pad. You drill holes and run copper pipes. Elegant viscera from room to room. Someday, someone will piss right here. They'll fuck over there and eat here. Children will sleep in quiet blue sheets. Loud yellow buses rumble early by. Lefty loosey, cold is on the right. Shit flows downhill, payday is Friday. I know these things like God's voice. Everything fits together so tightly. The story has a happy ending. Go ahead. I'll wait to turn the water on all the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was terrific. I know I've got a couple of burning questions when we get to the Q&A, but I really appreciate that reading. Well, we will turn to a completely different style of writing. Also often concerned with death, but in a somewhat different context. So we're going to have Grant read to us from Neon Kiss, one of his Hayden Fuller novels. This past fall, we released Neon Kiss in a beautiful hardcover edition, and I asked Grant to write a special introduction for this collector's edition, and he knocked out a wonderful essay, which he titled Crime Noir and the Poetics of Uncertainty. He talks a little bit about his own crime writing and stories, but really looks at the genre of detective fiction and so forth, more broadly. But really great essay. I appreciate his putting that together and putting it together so quickly. And then upon the occasion of this reading, we have just released Neon Kiss in a paperback edition. And so this has just been available the last few weeks. And in addition to the great essay that Grant wrote for the hardcover edition, we also sweetened the pot a little bit by including the first chapter of Grant's new Hayden Fuller Mystery, A Shoeshine Kill. So if you get the paperback edition, you not only get to read Neon Kiss and that great essay, but you get to get a little bit of a preview of the forthcoming Hayden novel. All right, let me give a little more formal intro for Grant, and then we'll let him do his thing here. First of all, let me just kind of clarify what we have published of Grant. 12 Winters has published the Hayden Fuller novels, Cheap Amusements, A Fourth Face, Neon Kiss, and the collection, 5 Hard Bites, as well as a collection of literary stories, Final Stanzas, and the memoir, Toronto 1965, Cheap Amusements Beats, and then a new Hayden novel, Shoeshine Kills, coming out later this year. So in 2015, Grant Tracey turned to writing crime noir. Before that, he had published nearly 50 short stories in small literary magazines and story collections. The sensibilities of his Hayden Fuller Mysteries, as well as other noir pieces, are in part indebted to the writings of Raymond Chandler, Samuel Fuller, Mickey Spillane, and Jim Thompson. Grant teaches creative writing and film at the University of Northern Iowa and edits the North American Review. In 2013, he received an Iowa Regents Award for faculty excellence. In 2021, he was a recipient of UNI's Graduate College Distinguished Scholar Award. In addition to writing, teaching, and editing, Grant has long been active in community theater as both actor and director, and he co-hosts with Brady Harrison and myself the podcast A Lesson Before Writing. And so with that, I will turn it over to Grant.
Thanks, Ted, and thanks to you all for being here. I see my wife's online, my daughter Elizabeth. I see Annette, Gail. Hey, Adam, good to see you. All right, well, let's rock and roll. I'm going to just read a little bit from that essay that Ted mentioned, and then I will read a little bit from Neon Kiss. Pulp writer Jim Thompson once said, "There's only one plot. Things are not what they seem." I love this quote because it gets to the heart of crime noir. Crime stories demand that readers are always at the ready, suspicious of every encounter. People lie, and the smallest of clues can reveal a crucial aspect in the psychology of a character, as an outer surface prop or a gesture can let us inside to the why: a cluttered desk, an ill-designed room, 2 cigarettes in an ashtray, each with differing shades of lipstick, or a book that sits haphazardly on a shelf. All of these details can imply a shadow self behind the masks characters wear. All 3 of my previous novels and the forthcoming A Shoeshine Kill, spin on lies that characters tell. Ever noticed how when people tell stories about themselves, they are either a victim a bystander outraged by an injustice, or a good person trying to make the situation better. They are never the bad guy, causing someone else pain. But everyone has it in them to hurt other people. I've acted in over 40 community playhouse productions, and I never judged the characters I play, but all of them were flawed, and all of them had inflicted pain on others, either directly or indirectly. That doesn't make any of these characters necessarily bad or unrelatable, but it does make them interesting. Crime fiction relies on attitude, of seeing the darkness within all hearts. We readers accept a certain fictional contract. We're always on our guard. Everyone is a suspect. Everyone has something to hide, and everyone is prone to half-truths and lying to protect themselves or others. What clue will reveal the hidden truth? In The Big Sleep, Vivian Regan tells Philip Marlowe he doesn't put on much of a front, and he replies, "You can't make much money at this trade if you're honest. If you have a front, you're making money, or expect to," close quote. In crime novels, every scene, every person the detective interviews has a front, and there's money to be made in how those fronts are perceived. The hero has to keep his distance. How does the detective do this? Repartee, one-liners, a sense of humor, judgmental descriptions of characters' appearances, and the numbing effects of alcohol. Thus, crime novels place the reader in perpetual uncertainty. Cognitively, readers are in a much different space than they are when reading a literary work of an Alice Munro who tells large canvas stories with alternating perspectives, timelines, and text within text. We believe, trust in her narrative voice. In crime stories, we often believe in or side with our hero, but we don't believe in the multiplicity of narratives, the competing voices that spring up around him. The knight, to play with a famous quote by Raymond Chandler, is never just the knight. It's always something more than. Chandler once joked that he wasn't good at writing three-person scenes, so his debut novel begins with 3 two-person scenes. But despite that shortcoming, Chandler establishes character voice attitude that is at the heart of the American detective ethos. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, mid-October. The sun not shining and a look of hard, wet rain in the clearness of the foothills. I was wearing my powder blue shirt, tie, and display handkerchief, black brogues, black wool socks with dark blue clocks on them. I was neat, clean, shaved, and sober, and I didn't care who knew it. I was everything the well-dressed detective ought to be. I was calling on $4 million. The opening establishes Marlowe's wry attitude. His self-deprecating humor, the display handkerchief, cracks me up. And a subtle reveal, he has a drinking problem. His escape from the Pyrrhic, the cost of every quest he undertakes. Moreover, the threat of a hard rain underscores the violence, the mean streets down which this man must go. Finally, his quip about $4 million establishes via contrast Marlowe as a hardworking, honest man, navigating his spaces in a world of privilege, entitlement, and excess. Later in chapter 3, when Marlowe meets Vivian for the first time, Chandler further explores this theme of excess and his lead character's distance from such a world. This room was too big. The ceiling was too high. The doors were too tall, and the white carpet that went from wall to wall looked like a fresh fall of snow at Lake Arrowhead. There were full-length mirrors and crystal doodads all over the place. The ivory furniture had chromium on it, and the enormous ivory drapes lay tumbled on the white carpet a yard from the windows. The white made the ivory look dirty, and the ivory made the white look bled out. The windows stared towards the darkening foothills. It was going to rain soon. There was pressure in the air already. And by the way, just a little sidebar, I strongly believe that Raymond Chandler was a huge fan of Scott Fitzgerald, and this description is reminiscent of that description of the women at the party early on in Great Gatsby, and it looks like they're just floating on air. Anyway, light coming through the window and out into the grass. Anyway, my favorite moment here, the enormous ivory drapes lay tumbled on the white carpet a yard from the windows. Talk about excess. The detail, along with the too high ceiling and too high doors, shows that Vivian lacks precision and control. No wonder there's pressure in the air. Her life contains too muchness. And the judgment behind dirty and bled out is all you need to know about Marlowe's protective armor, his distancing himself from the world he must travel in. This is setting as attitude. This is a character who is never completely comfortable in the world he navigates. By contrast, In the European detective story procedurals of Georges Chaminade, his inspector Jules Maigret has a keen eye for detail that reveals the hidden psychology of the characters he's pursuing, but the world for him is a much friendlier place. Maigret sets a trap, translated by Daphne Woodward. Chaminade establishes the possibility of Marcel Monsand's guilt with a detail that appears possibly just tossed away. She had opened the glass-paneled door of a drawing room done up in modern style, which was unexpected in this old house, which had nothing aggressive about it. Maigret told himself he wouldn't mind living in a setting like this. Only the paintings on the walls displeased him. He couldn't make head or tail of them. The last sentence is the punchline, the clue. The paintings are a mess because they mirror the disordered mind of a serial killer. Moreover, unlike the distance in Marlowe's voice, Chaminade humanizes Maigret as a man who connects with the world and its simple comforts. Maigret told himself he wouldn't mind living in a setting like this. Marlowe would never feel this way about any setting he walks through, except perhaps his lonely apartment and the chessboard in front of him. Maigret is very secure, moving about the arrondissements of Paris. The world is non-threatening. Throughout the Maigret novels, Chaminade presents his chief inspectors enjoying the quotidien, drinking a beer, standing by a warm fire, going to the cinema Saturday evenings with his wife, and walking with his wife in the evenings and surreptitiously sticking out his tongue to catch falling snowflakes. Okay, so that's just a little bit of the essay. That's sort of the beginning of it. Now, because my Canadian homeboy is here, love you, Brady, I am going to read the very beginning of the novel. And as some of you know, Hayden's a former hockey player, and I don't get the right about hockey per se because he was kicked out of the league. Well, in this novel, he's back and he's now playing for the Bleu Blanc Rouge, Les Glorieux, the Montreal Canadiens. And so this is the beginning of the novel. The section here is called Pregame. I don't know why I thought he'd be there. When had he not let me down before? 2 green seats several rows up from the Habs bench, vacant. Stanley Younger sat in the row behind, a new set of hoop earrings glinting in the glare from the ice. Her shoulders were thrown forward, experiencing every rush, every hit, every pass, shot and save, as if she were on the ice herself. It's what I admire about her, commitment. It was great to see her. But those 2 other seats. I quickly flexed my fingers inside my gloves and skated half circles by our goalie, Charlie Hodge. We got this, Hodgie, I said. His eyes focused past me, lost in the meditative realm of projected successes, a save, the clock winding down, a clear and breakout from our end, and the puck sliding over the checkered line across the way. The crowd at the Gardens was wobbly rocks whooping around inside a hubcap. I glanced over my shoulder, water dropping from my chin, tight coins. Near the end blues set into a wall like a private WW2 bunker were my former bosses, Leafs owners Stephen Smith and Cal Bullard. Both of them are facing trials for illegal gambling and embezzlement. Things are even worse for Smith, who is up on charges of extortion and racketeering. How could they still show themselves in this grand old barn that once housed the likes of Stillaps, Max Bentley, and Teeter Kennedy? Bunting draped from their bunker, red and white, with a cluster of inlaid poppies, asking us to remember sacrifices made. It was November 11th, Remembrance Day. My father had a cousin who died at Vimy. The 11th day on the 11th hour of November, the Great War ended. There are Canadians buried in fields all over Europe, Belgium mostly. I took in a deep breath, flexed fingers once more. The whomping was a rhythmic wash of loud, louder, loudest, and then silence, followed by a slow winding rush of loud, louder, loudest, all over again. I wiped the corners of my mouth and smiled in the direction of Jean Beliveau. Far post, he pointed. I nodded. Before the game, the 48th Highlanders played the Maple Leaf Forever. Bagpipes never sounded so damn good. It was great to be back in the place I once called home. From his bunker, Bullard hunched, readying for the face-off, absently reaching into his large bag of potato chips, pulling out chips that looked like an ear or two. Sharp flecks dripped from his chin and speckled the inlaid poppies with grease stains. Christ. Smith, a blur of white phosphorus, his skin parchment thin, slouched back, belching into his skinny hand. He'd been in the hospital last month for bleeding ulcers. Looked like he lost 40 pounds. I guess I should have sent him a get-well card. The trial was set for January 1966, and Perry Mason isn't a real guy, so these cats, they're fucked. I parked in front of our far post, cutting the ice in half, giving the Leafs less room. 52 seconds to go. After my last case involving N'Oublie Jamais, Red 45, and a plot to poison the water filtration system in Montreal, Anne Chevalier and the RCMP implored NHL President Clarence S., as in Soupy or Shithead, you decide, Campbell to reinstate me with the Habs, and he did, bless his heart. In the South, such a phrase, bless his heart, can be ironically inflected. I'm intending the inflection. Bless his heart. Anyway, this was our 9th game of the season. Our record 4-2-2. My stats: 3 goals, 4 assists, 3 fights on the season. Potted my 3rd tally of the year, the go-ahead goal midway through the 2nd, high stick side on Bauer just under the bar. Also assist on our 1st goal, Cornwallis on the power play, and earned 5 minutes for fighting to start the 3rd, a Gordie Howe hat trick. Don't know why we call it that. A goal and assist, a fight, a Gordie Howe hat trick. Howe only had 2 in his career, and the last one was in 1954, for Christ's sakes, but the guy's like a regular registered trademark, the Gordie Howe hat trick. I'm surprised he doesn't have his own line of hockey sticks. That's ironic. He did have his own line. Beliveau was waved out of the circle for cheating, leaning in. He skated a loose lariat around the linesman and then dimly smiled at me. It's all yours. The Leaf net at the other end was empty. Coach Yu, two-fisted Farrell, had a foot up on their bench, shouting something about streetcars and desire. Some things never change. I shook my head and then set myself behind the dot. Booze rattled, waffling over the whomp-whomp of cheers. I gave Pulley my lopsided leer. He didn't say anything. I had 5 stitches in my chin from our fight and a bitter taste of tin in my mouth. My stick hit the ice, then his stick, then the puck. But I didn't go for the puck. I went for Pulford and his stick, tying him up, knowing the refs wouldn't call it, keeping him from drawing the puck back. And J.C. Tremblay picked up the biscuit on the dot, backhanded it behind our net, and Jacques Laperriere cleared the zone. Horton quickly retrieved it at center and rushed up ice, dumping it back in. Pulley crashed the boards behind our net, gathering in the puck, but I wedged my stick between his legs up against his left skate so he couldn't move. I locked my hand on his sweater. There's no way he'd fall and draw a tripping call. And our captain, LeGros Bill, scraped up the leftover saucer to pass to Tremblay, who alley-ooped one to Claude Provost, who lumbered over the blue line to center and rifled a shot into the middle of the Leaf net, 3-1. I shrugged and smiled at the crowd as a whomp-whomping flattened into 2 waffling notes and then a warbling waterfall, 2 vacant seats. Stana stood applauding, the purse on her left wrist the size of a large milk crate. She wore a brown pantsuit and a sandy pillbox hat. The Leafs fans around her were giving her the business, thumbs down, mouthing off, and she mouthed off right back at them. I waved in their direction, and then their thumbs were thumbing me down. Programs waltzed and curved my way, sharp-edged frisbees. They weren't asking for autographs. Beliveau tapped my shin guards. Heady play. He ruffled my buzz cut. I always told you you'd like playing for Montreal. Damn straight. Beliveau was my roommate and the nicest cat I've ever suited up with. Merci, I said. Bullard crumpled his bag of chips into a large rock and threw it at the ice. I think it bounced off the head of an usher, 2 aisles down. Class. As I left the ice, the timekeeper tapped me on the shoulder and said McClellan Stewart, the voice of the Leafs on radio, had selected me one of the game's 3 stars. I hung around the tunnel, fans jeering, shouting frog lover, pea soup, and I just breathed and looked off in the direction of my father's empty seat. My shoulder pads felt heavy, and my left leg shook. Why was I scared of a curtain call? Ladies and gentlemen, the 3rd star, Hayden Fuller. Okay, yes, it was my first game back at the Gardens, and I guess I wasn't expecting a parade or some damn thing, but I wanted to be respected, and the fans were actually cheering me, many of them. Sure, there was some boos, but there was a greater mix of appreciation, and it filled me with thankfulness, and I smiled, pointing an index finger, acknowledging the crowd, our past connection. 9 years I was a Leaf, 458 consecutive games, 107 goals, 2 cups. Before those assholes, those arrested adolescent playboys, Bullard and Smith, bounced me to the American Hockey League for moral turpitude. I'd taken nude photos of a cheating wife, divorce case for one of my teammates, Bobby Ale. At 29, I retired. At 30, I was back. But not with the blue and white, but with the bleu blanc rouge. My dad's seat, empty. Bullard crunched back in his bunker, eyes hard, hands across his chest, face dour. Smith slithered in his seat like a long white worm, his Lombardi glasses resting on top of his head as if he were some kind of famous general at the Plains of Abraham or some damn thing. And then I did it. I always was a smartass. They had fucked me over. I was a Toronto kid, listened to games on radio throughout childhood, stood in the standing room only section of the Grays as the Leafs won the Cup in 1951 on Bill Barocco's goal. They took that away from me. Moral turpitude, my ass. Their idea of having fun was having naked women pose as human lamps in their office. I was there for such a display of morality. Great guys. I skated in the direction of their bunker and their bunting and their bullshit, imagining it a Kraut pillbox, and took a phantom grenade, pulled the pin with my teeth, and with a straight arm gesture lobbed it in their direction. The crowd really liked that. Standing, applauding. They weren't booing anymore. And so, right after the game, he goes into the dressing room and gets the news that his father's been murdered. And I'm just going to read a little bit from that scene. So I'm going to, fast forward a little bit. This is when he goes to his dad's home in Scarborough. So he's it's like he's looking for a legacy. What did dad leave for me? And he finds a variety of things. There was yellow tape everywhere, and the smell hadn't changed, even with 2 windows left open. The house had stilled. I was surprised that the clock on a low coffee table was ticking. I had expected it to be stopped too, like my dad. It was next to a row of beer bottles and an empty of Orange Crush, and read 217. I couldn't sleep. The police had left the scene. I climbed through the kitchen window. I had to be here, I said. It was to find a clue, but I suspect I was here as a son, looking for what a father leaves behind for a son. I strolled through the kitchen. A ceramic sink was chipped, the marks resembling small leeches. A cupboard door was particularly ajar. Behind the door was a dumbwaiter with small pulleys, wheels, and ropes that I used to play in, pretending I was an astronaut, the basement below Mars. I pushed back my pork pie and picked up a bottle of Remy Martin that was parked by the sink. I don't drink, but in honor of my father, I poured 2 fingers. I knocked it back. It burned going down. God damn it. There are things I wanted to say to this son of a bitch that I can't now. So many things. I found a half-empty Tampax box under the sink in the bathroom. No other signs of a woman, no perfume, no air fresheners, no intimates, no pink toothbrushes, nothing. But in the bedroom, a large portrait of a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus, haloed with enough radioactive afterglow to burn out your retinas. Shit. Jesus wasn't blonde. He was swarthy like me. And Dad was a Jew. I'm a Jew. And I don't know what's with the goy Jesus at the foot of the bed. This had to belong to the woman with the Tampax box. So she also belonged to the bedroom? Who is she? And the box was half empty. And if tampons were bought just a few days ago, that meant the woman wasn't planning on coming back right away, if at all. I plunked myself down in the living room in Dad's slick leather chair with its worn down arms and the heady smell of cigarette ashes, beer, and sweat. And then a little bit further. I collapsed down the chair, breathing in the darkness and the dirt and wondering why Dad didn't take better care of himself, this place, and what's with this blonde Jesus. And then I saw it, the switch plate across from me. There was a sliver of clean wall, bleached white, above and around all sides of the plate's rim. It was an odd detail, but quirky enough to be important. I snapped my fingers. Dad had removed the switch plate recently, and when he replaced it, he over-tightened the plate in place, sinking it into the plaster, allowing some of the previous hidden wall to show. But did he just replace the light switch, or... I grabbed a screwdriver from the silverware drawer, that's where he always kept that shit, and unscrewed the plate from the wall, pulled up the switch with its 3 wires, and wedged behind it was an envelope. I opened it. Why did Dad hide this? Is this some kind of keepsake? Blackmail? Did he know he was going to die? There's a photograph of a young woman, 15 or thereabouts, with caramel-colored skin, high-accented cheekbones, ragged black bangs, and green eyes. There was a space between her 2 front teeth, and her face was vaguely amused at having her picture taken. It was as if my father wanted me to find it. Knew I would. But why? To find her? On the outside of the envelope was written 11/14/65, midnight mass. A Friday night mass? Where? What mass? What church? Why the fucking question mark, midnight mass? Moreover, who is the girl? I really wanted to listen to some jazz right about now, Jimmy Smith, Kenny Burrell, Art Blakey, but Dad was more of a Johnny Cash, Marty Robbins, Hank Williams kind of guy. I sank into the chair, removed my hat, closed my eyes. The girl, the mass. This was the goddamn clue I needed. but what did it mean? All right, and that's as far as I'll read.
All right. Well, thank you, Grant. That was terrific. I'm glad you read from the essay too. I didn't realize you were going to do that. I think that was good. Good lead in. Well, we've got a few minutes for some questions. Hopefully, some folks have some things they want to ask about. I'll maybe get the ball rolling because I wanted to ask Jeremy a couple of things if I could. I'll just kind of couch a couple of questions together, then I'll stop talking. But I noticed in this collection, Jeremy, that you have your style is a little different than previous poems of yours that I've read and that I've published, in that it's punctuation free for one thing. There are no in punctuation marks. I don't think there's even any commas anywhere. And you've always been spare with your use of punctuation in your poetry, but this is taking it a bit further. And I'm from John Knopfel country, as you know, and John Knopfel kind of pioneered this technique of no punctuation, no capitalization. You didn't go quite that far, but I was very much reminded of some of John's poetry, which is a supreme compliment, by the way. And then I'll also kind of add in there, I was really interested as you were reading, a lot of your poems have some, some pretty long lines. And I noticed as you read, you often kind of broke in the middle. And being a medieval literature enthusiast, I was immediately reminded of Old English poetry like Beowulf and so forth that would have a two-part line, a part A and a part B. And I'm also kind of really thinking about that because I'm actually reviewing a book about some mid 20th century poets who seem to have been influenced by their encounter with Beowulf and medieval poetry and how that influenced their own poetry writing. But anyway, those were things that kind of struck me as you were reading. So I wonder if you could maybe speak to those or whatever of that rambling you'd like to.
Thanks, Ted. You're the best reader I have. That was really insightful. And thank you for the question. Yeah, the style, I'm glad you mentioned the style because it's very different from the book you published. It's very different from the book that I published before that even. And I think I described the differences. The early work that early work was really raw. And it was really, I was much more meticulous about things, whether it was punctuation or not. And these poems I wanted to really let go. And so even though they are lineated, you can see, their line breaks. I've come to call these poems prose poems. I think they're lineated prose poems because the style is reflecting a kind of, or it's paralleling in a way, just as the details in a scene that Grant might be describing is reflecting an inner self. So the style in the poem here is reflecting a consciousness. It's reflecting cognition in the midst of thinking. Or feeling. It's the inner state that is on the surface of the page. And so if that's the case, I wanted there to be no impediment at all, including punctuation. And all the first lines are capitalized. You might not be able to see that here. So having capitalization and no punctuation was simply telling myself as a writer that I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have a decision to make. It was already made for me, which allowed me then to be a little bit wilder. Now, of course, I go back and I revise, intensely after the fact, but I wanted to retain the trace of the process of thinking and feeling and being a psychological, emotional self. And I'm glad you pointed out too, this two parts. Some of my poems have that rhythm to it, especially lingo. The word for love is mirror. The word for life is grass. And I actually had thought of these poems as I don't want any more than two ideas in one line. I don't want to muddle. So some of the lines are very long because it's a longer syntax or it's a longer whatever. But I didn't want to have three things in there. I could only do the two. And as I think you might know this, I studied Old English in college and grad school, and I've translated Beowulf, and it was an early love of mine. I was going to become a medievalist. There was a point in the road or a fork in the road where I was either going to go to creative writing or become a medievalist, and I went into creative writing. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers some of the questions. But thanks for that.
I'm just going to piggyback on that, Jeremy.
Yeah, dude.
I got a copy right here. And
hey, look at that.
I was reading along, and I don't know anything about Old English poetry. I mean, I have to study it. It's the language requirement at Kansas State. But what struck me was a bit of a Christopher Walken style.
Yeah.
The way you're doing the poem. So, and you were like I caught that middle thing, but you didn't do that all the time because I'm sure the poems aren't
No.
set up that way. But sometimes when you got to the end stop of the line, even though there's no punctuation, you would just run it into the next line.
That's right.
Other times you'd stop, and sometimes you would stop 3/4 in the line. Like it felt like improv. Like I'm gonna pause where I want to, like Walken does, So anyway, I thought that was really super cool hearing you read it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that if I read it again right now, it would be slightly different. Just like if you ran a scene again and you were doing improv and you had the same scenario, you would run it differently. You would say something slightly differently. You would walk over here and be blocked differently.
All right, very cool. I don't want to completely, take over the Q&A. Is there anyone out there who would like to ask a question? Yeah, Brady's got his hand raised, literally.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeremy and Grant. I think you're both terrific readers. However, I'm going to go home, leave the office feeling quite badly because you're both so dark, and I don't even really know if I have a question so much, or just sort of wondering, a couple of things like, is the Well of Darkness experience, is it a reaction to reading the newspapers? Is it your coming to terms with the nature of existence? And then how do you go to those places? Like Grant, in reading your fiction, like pretty terrible things are happening. Right? So I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm asking. But how do you? Where does it come from, and how do you deal with it? Put it that way.
Wow.
Grant?
I guess wow, I don't know. I think I'm a pretty upbeat person for the most part in my real life, but I think there's also a lot of I mean, I'm not asking you to send me, get well cards here or anything, but there's just a lot of pain in my past, a lot of abuse that, I went through as a kid, and I think it manifests itself. I got to let it out somewhere, and I think I was just a kid who escaped by entering into a world of fiction and reading books and movies and comics and all that stuff, and I don't think I really ever dealt with it. So when I write, I can go to those places, but within a very defined, like, I can't explain this, but like I believe in heroes. I believe in people trying to do the right. I have a very old-fashioned notion of like the Westerner. For me, the private eye should be a moral man or woman, and always trying to do the right thing, but you don't always succeed. Temptation, failure, evil, whatever. And so I think that guides a lot of my dark place, and my lead character Hayden and Eddie in the other series I'm writing, they try to do right, and maybe that's another form of protection. Just as I had this protection in the past of, escaping, maybe putting myself in those kind of narratives as a kind of protection from the world where there's clear cut black hats, white hats kind of thing. I don't know.
Brady, I was going to ask a similar question to Grant, and I think that maybe you articulated it better than I was. I was noticing in that scene in which it's his father's death scene, right? I mean, what he does, he's feeling things, and you can sense it, but he's focusing on the clues, and he's solving a mystery. And there's pain, but the mystery and the story, the narrative, gives him a way to get through it. Like he's still connected to his father. He's like, okay, now his father's talking to him again through this note that was left in the door. So I was going to ask a question about that, but I think it's related to this idea of how do you go to dark places? Narrative is one way, story can take you there. Maybe that's why stories pop up in a lot of my poems just as little blips of, hey, here's a little story, and then it goes away. But I love that scene, Grant. That was amazing.
Thank you.
He's first there as an absence because he's not in his seat. Right. So he shows up early, but he's not there, which I think is beautiful. Now we get the bigger scene where he's not there.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I hadn't even noticed that. But yeah, yeah, the absence at the Maple Leaf Gardens. He's not there, and then we find out why. And then he's not there in his home in Scarborough. Yeah, that's didn't even realize I'd done that.
I was curious, Jeremy, whenever someone has a collection, at what point in the writing of these poems did you start to think of it as a collection, or was that kind of your intention from the beginning? But what was sort
Yeah.
of the evolution of this project from the beginning?
Yeah, I really envy. I mean, I'm writing fiction right now, and I feel differently about it. I envy like Grant's always knows when you're done. Like, you know the story's over when things are resolved. But a poem, a poetry collection, you don't know when it's done necessarily. And I started writing these maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't think of them. I wasn't writing a collection. I was writing poems. It was actually just an experiment in process more than anything. And then I created a bunch of them, and I had a whole mess of poems. And I was invited to do a reading at University of Dubuque, and I was like, oh, and I didn't have any new book out, so I thought, well, I'll throw some of these poems together. And I read at University of Dubuque, and Andrew Jones there asked me, he's like, well, what are you going to do with these? I was like, you know what, maybe I should maybe I should do something with all these poems I've been writing. Some of them had been published in journals, but I hadn't really conceived of it as a collection. I thought of it as a cohesive or a experiment in process, and all of these were a product of that experiment. So I was prompted to put them together as a collection, sort of from external forces more than anything.
Well, it is a beefy chapbook. I mean, it's I mean, the poems themselves have a lot of girth and are longer poems, and there's a lot of them. So it's almost kind of bordering on, I don't know at
Yeah,
what point a chapbook becomes a collection, but for anyone who has got a hold of it, it is to me, it's kind of a chapbook on steroids or something. I mean, which is great. I
Okay.
mean, there's a lot of great material there. So
it's a bargain.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Any other questions out there for either Grant or Jeremy or heck, anyone who's here? Can I pick on John Paul Jaramillo a second? John Paul
I
is
was
one of
just going to ask a
our
question. This is a great time.
good, good.
Perfect
Well, then
time.
I'll let you ask your question rather than putting you on the spot. So go. John Paul is one of our 12 Winters authors. His
Yeah.
novel Carlos Montoya just came out last year, so get a hold of that too while you're at it. But go ahead, John Paul.
Well, that was great reading. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, so Jeremy sort of spoke to process of putting together a collection of poems, and so I guess I usually ask the obligatory process question. So maybe I'll put it to both of you, even though I think Jeremy sort of answered it. But Grant, you write big long novels. How do you do that? What
Oh,
is your process? I'm always fascinated just to hear just sort of behind the scenes sort of thoughts on how
yeah,
you put all this
I
together.
that's a great question, and I don't know. I mean, part of it is okay, so I will come up with sort of a master plot, and I got a few key things that are going to happen. Then I start writing it, and then all kinds of stuff surprises me, and then the master plot changes. I do know that with the last few novels I've been working on, I've been trying different things in terms of form. I didn't want to just keep writing 12 chapters or 13 chapters or whatever, you know. So like in Neon Kiss, there's there, I based it on sort of a hockey game. So there's pre-game, and then there's first period, second period, I think a thing called dressing room, and then third period, maybe overtime. I can't remember. But so I shape it like a game as a structure, but I didn't come up with the structure first. It kind of announced itself to me. I wanted more freedom instead of shorter chapters to just let the thing breathe. And then with the Shoe Shine Kill, I based it on the Soviet Canadian Summit Series of 1972. And I wanted there are 8 games played, and I wanted to just do the 4 games in Canada, but I want to do the day before and the day of the game, or the night of the game. So it's basically 7 or 8 days that the story takes place in. And then and that announced itself pretty quickly as a structuring pattern. And then with the latest one I've been working on, Artifacts, I wanted to take the idea of the story cycle where you have all these stories and then it adds up to something like, like the novel is the collection of stories. So in Artifacts, I have 3 stories. One's called The Hanging Tree, the other one's called Death Beat a Moloch, and the third one's called Artifacts. But they all work together to create the novel. And there's characters announced in one story, then they become a centerpiece of the next story. But the stories aren't really stories, they're really chapter titles because they all fit together. And who we find out is the killer in the first story, wrong. And the second story, wrong. Remember I was telling you about lies. And in the third story, we finally find out. I just finished a draft of this, so that's why I could talk about this rather succinctly. The third story, we get the reveal of who the real killer is of this indigenous woman who was hanging outside a church on a tree. And everyone thinks it's suicide, but it ends up being a rather nasty murder. So anyway, yes, that's but I go into it, just sort of stumble, kick around, see what happens, see what turns up, because I'm very much a seat of the pants writer. But when you're writing mysteries, you do have to know who the killer is, and you have to know, you got to connect some things. But in one of my novels, one of the people that killed someone ended up not killing that person. When I started writing it, it became somebody else. So these things change as I'm in the process. So it's kind of a muddled answer, but there's not one formula. I've been trying to. I really admire John Steinbeck, as Brady and Ted and Jeremy know, and Elizabeth. And what I admire about Steinbeck, his whole life, he was constantly working on his craft, constantly writing different voices, different styles, writing plays, writing, something like Cannery Row is different from East of Eden, which is different from Grapes of Wrath, which is different from, things like The Red Pony and The Pearl and Indubious Battle, which is kind of a proletarian novel. So I'm just like, I want to be like, God, it sounds egotistical, but I want to be like Steinbeck in the sense of constantly challenging myself to try something new instead of just, oh, here's another 12 chapter, mystery yarn.
So your next challenge, Grant, speculative fiction.
I know. I'm
Do some sci-fi.
a little steampunk, baby.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Any other questions out there for Grant or Jeremy? Well, all right. This book was as good of a reading as I anticipated, so I really appreciate you guys giving up some time. And Jeremy, you're having to give up some research time out there in Cambridge to do a little reading for us. And again, just as a reminder, Jeremy's book is American Sad from Main Street Rag. So get a hold of that. And we've got Grant's Neon Kiss in both hardcover and paperback editions. And look for A Shoeshine Kill a bit later this year. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll go ahead and hit the stop record button, but there will be a copy on YouTube, so feel free to spread the word once I get that uploaded pretty quickly here. All right, thanks guys, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. It was awesome, Jerry.
Hit the stop record button here.